Welcome to the Road is Dead podcast, episode 84. I'm your host, Rob Curtis, here in the studio today with
Tim Strelecki,
Leah Sanda.
And joining us today, as always, we have Mr.
Mike Friedman.
And our guest today, Mr. Chad Hartley. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Chad.
Don't be shy.
I'm Chad Hartley.
All right.
Modest. I like it. Modest approach.
Obviously, Chad and Mike have a bit of a background. They've gotten in a lot of fights over the years. They've been teammates in the past. They've done a lot of racing together, and we didn't let them do a lot of talking. They haven't talked to each other in a while. We didn't let them do a lot of talking before we started this. So go ahead, talk to each other. I'll take my answers offline.
That's so weird, yeah. Rob. Yeah. Hi, Chad. It's nice to see you.
What's happening?
Dude, I haven't seen you. I don't remember when last time I saw you. So it's nice to see you in person via whatever this Riverside video. So
I'm gonna go with the 2006, whatever those crips in Colorado were at the end of the season, like September.
2006. That's when we started. That's when we were teammates.
Yeah. I don't think we've seen each other. Oh, no. Yeah. Riding up Mount Baldy when you had your Iliac thing. Yeah.
They just told us the story about that. It was pretty funny.
That's crazy, dude. I forgot about that because
I was already out of the race, so it's fine.
Tell me the story, Chad.
Well, I'm saying that I was on the side of the road. And you started with 6 to 7K up Mount Baldy, and then you went down Glendora Ridge, and then circled around, and then you went all the way up to the summit. So it was 10 miles into the race, and the race was already blowing to shit. And you saw me on the side of the road, and you're like, "Chad, I think I have iliac kink." And you're like, yeah, you were in the middle of nowhere at that point. There's already a gruppetto, and
it was early in the stage. That was one of those races where you had another 150K to go, and you're already off the back.
Yeah.
And you got to make time cut.
And I was like, Mike, just ride your bike. That's the last stage. You didn't need to finish. It's fine.
Were you racing at that edition of California that year?
Yeah, I DNF'd on, I don't know, stage 3 or 4 or something.
But you had
a pretty bad asthma attack.
But you had the iliac artery thing before that, because that's why I said that to you, right? I'm sorry, dude. I don't remember exactly the story. I know that because why else would I have said that to you?
Yeah, I had it started in 2006, and then I had it fixed in 2008.
Did you have the Dacron patch put on, or they use your own biological material? Like the saphenous?
Yeah, just a venous patch, the saphenous vein.
Yeah, same.
On my ankle.
Did you notice a difference?
Less chance of...
Did you notice a difference?
I think I have it again.
Are you guys familiar with what we're talking about, what he and I are going back and forth on? Because we're kind of going, we haven't seen each other in so long, but we're getting into different things that really affected our careers, which is it's a fairly common, I think more common than people realize. It's and it happens for various reasons, but it's a reduction in blood flow based on various factors within your vascular structure leading to your legs. And you can have in different areas. Chad was in his ankle. Mine was in my abdomen. Shit. I'm sorry. I need to start.
No, mine was in my abdomen too. It's
it was?
They
took the saphenous vein. They took the saphenous
where the
vein.
aorta comes out, it goes down to your belly button, and then it splits, and that's the iliac.
Yep.
The way the iliac goes over the psoas, it can bend and kink like a straw. And initially, it's just that kinking is an intermittent shut off of blood flow. But like a straw, once it's bent, it will, your body as a protection mechanism starts to grow this tissue to stiffen it. And then that tissue decreases the diameter of the artery. So it's a degenerative disease, and it will just keep growing until eventually you have no blood flow in your leg at all, even for walking.
Yeah, and it's really, it's an interesting feeling because you're like going super hard and it gets progressively worse. So your leg is getting worse and worse and worse. So over time, you're like going to the chiropractor, you're going to get massage, you're going to the physio, trying to figure out solutions to the problem. And here it is, it's a blood flow issue, especially when you start going harder as your blood pressure goes up. Your blood it becomes restricted. So you're shunting off the oxygen, rich blood flow you need to your leg when you're working out by having the scar tissue build up over time, of pedaling, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times we pedal. So over time, that scar tissue builds and builds and builds. Yeah. Crazy, dude.
What of that 2005, 2016, 7 people had it.
Wow.
I commented that on like an old Velo News.
I don't remember that. It was you?
Yeah, like Ian McGregor, Mike Lang Gillespie, you, me.
You're talking over time.
A couple of.
You're talking over time. The guys you've had.
Well, no,
time.
I mean, five of us had it like at that time or ended our careers.
Or was already onset that ended our careers that we hadn't discovered yet. Yeah, that's interesting, dude. I had never thought about that stat. That's interesting.
And I said it once, and JV like came out of the woodwork and called me and was like, "You got to take that down. It makes it seem like we were doing something like." Giving you guys something that got it. And I'm like, when talking with Bobby Lee had it.
Yep.
The only thing that we can really correlate with it is like, if you're already training at a pretty high level and then you got the call up to Europe or the call up to the Olympics and you just like had a 20% increase in volume, that jump seemed to be a pretty big trigger for most people.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see like how far that goes because it's a lot of people. Like there's forums on Facebook with people struggling from the same thing. People that really have these ailments, and it ends either race careers or training careers. I mean, people do it for hobby too, and they have the same symptoms. Where I guess I should look at the forum more closely because I don't know if they're all competitive or not. That's interesting that and you're right. There are a large number of us in a very small group that had that issue, and we all increased our volume quite a bit, so that is interesting.
Well, I mean, do you guys think that there's possibly quite a few others that are still riding and or racing or training with this condition that don't even recognize it?
For sure. Yeah. Because
absolutely.
Yeah. It's a slow onset. It doesn't just show up until it's bad enough that it's bad enough. It's like plumbing. Same thing.
Like I've had it before. I've had it fixed. And it just dawned on me like last week that once I recognized the symptoms that I had and I rode essentially correctly on my saddle, not twisted, immediately I was like, oh, I have it again. Because the right leg would just die within 30 seconds.
This time on the other side?
I had been, no, same side.
Same side.
But I've been compensating for so long, and I'm just like, oh, my back is sore, or like, oh, I can't get comfortable on this saddle. And it's because I'm rotated roughly 20, 30 degrees to take pressure off the top of my quad and use my glute and hamstring more.
So to compensate for the same feeling again. So you're already going through all the same compensation measures that you did back in the day.
Yeah, and I didn't even notice it until I literally got a fit last Wednesday. I went out and did a 20-minute effort, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And then I'm like, my girlfriend Lauren was behind me. She's like, you're sitting so crooked. And so I just sat straight, and as soon as I did, I was like, oh, shit.
Wow.
And the thing is it's quite invasive to fix the solution or to find the solution. It's not a simple fix. Like it's a pretty in-depth procedure. I mean, here, I'll show you the scar. You should probably have one of these too. Right there. I see your scar chad.
Scar boys?
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
They pull all that stuff out of there to get to that iliac artery that's branching off your main aorta, right? And then they have to get to that, and then they have to put it all back in there. So you're cutting through all kinds of tissue to get down in there just to sacrifice your body to ride a fucking bike.
Yeah,
which
I remember
understand.
But it's my sanity, Mike. It's my sanity.
It's all our sanities.
Completely.
I remember back at the Trek Cup, Chad, we were talking, and you were saying you were having a little bit of issues. So do you think it was rearing its ugly head back then?
Oh yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, that's why they put me on that huge wide saddle to like try to stabilize my pelvis.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's so interesting. I mean, the only way to test for that is a blood pressure test at duress, right? Like, did you get tested when you went in? Did they test your pressure at your ankles or your arms and then like your chest?
Yeah, ABI, ankle brachial index.
Yeah, right. ABI
and, yeah,
test,
the
right.
The blood flow in my right leg was 44%.
How do they test you? They test you by running, or did you take a bike in?
I took a bike and a trainer.
Same.
And I just got on, pedaled as hard as I could for like 4 minutes until I could barely unclip the leg.
Yeah, because the position matters. Like if you do it running, you're standing vertical, so your pipe going straight down is much more open than when you're bent over the handlebars, and even in the drops around the hoods, giving it 350, 400 watts. It's totally different.
Well, that actually raises a question in my head as a former bike fitter: is how low you are in the front. Does it have a factor on it? And you think people who are racing seriously tend to be in a lot more aggressive position. You're really shutting down your hip angle a lot. And if you're sitting more upright, maybe riding a mountain bike or something, I mean, is it less likely to be an issue?
Before I had it fixed the first time, if I was riding on the tops, it was 300 watts. If I was riding on the hoods, it was 280. And if I was in the drops, it was 180.
Wow.
That's how much it would fall off.
And that's the only difference is blood flow to the muscles of the leg by opening up that kink, so by sitting up, you're opening up allowing that blood flow through. So, I mean, that's the 1% difference, Pogacar, that guy who's crushing the world right now, like his artery, that could be the 1% difference that makes a huge difference in someone's performance, right? You have the engine, you have the physiological cardiovascular engine, but if your one area is restricted and you don't know until like a high level of restriction, it can be really impeding on your overall performance, really. I mean, and enjoyment of the sport. I mean, if you're just doing it for your sanity and just riding on the weekend, but you can't ride because your leg is blocking up, that's a problem, obviously, especially when you're racing. And then psychologically, it really fucks with your head because you think you suck, and then you're like abused by management.
I know, like I look at Strelecki and I'm like, I could fucking beat this guy, and then I just I can't, and I go home and I whip myself, and I call myself bad names in the mirror, and then
what makes you think you can beat me?
It's just on look.
I'm gonna go get some more water.
Man, pick on the little guy.
Hey, we got to bring everybody into the conversation.
Hey, that's all right.
Yeah, no, we do. We got sidetracked by, we haven't seen each other since then, but that is the thing that made us both ultimately retire in a way. Definitely affected our careers.
No, I think
sure.
I think it's great that you guys are having this conversation openly from two experienced professionals. Someone else, this is probably going to help someone else or open someone else's eyes to maybe some of the symptoms that you guys suffered and are currently suffering, and maybe they'll go get it checked.
Yeah. I mean,
I would add that the first time I had it was in Charlotte in the criterium, and I'm a pretty good criterium racer. I don't know if you guys know this.
You are good, dude. You are a good criterium rider.
But I was out of that race in 3 laps. I've never gotten dropped in a race in 3 laps. And I was out, sitting in a parking garage crying, I don't know what the hell just happened.
People don't realize how much emotion goes into that. It's so emotional. It changes you as a person because you've invested so much time and effort into it, and then to have that happen can be really devastating. I know it sounds so ridiculous to a certain maybe audience, but when you're really in it, it can really affect your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly attitude towards the whole thing and other aspects of your life.
I was gonna ask you, Mike, what was your? Do you have a first time that it happened to you?
Yes, Chad, I do.
First time.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I know that first time, and I know that
this isn't
story,
that type of podcast.
Sorry, I was away for a bit.
I could time trial, dude. I got third at U.S. Pro Time Trial Championships, and in Europe when we were doing some of these efforts, I remember having a distinct change in my. We've been doing a lot of track stuff, team pursuit stuff, Madison stuff, and then on the road we were doing a lot of time trial stuff, and I was not able to do the same effort without getting bunched up. I got more bunched up in my career, more upright, and I changed my position so I could get power, and that was definitely indicative when I go back and look back on it. But the other thing that I noticed was that leg would actually get bigger. And I've not really seen this in any of the like stuff I've read on this. What do they call it? Iliac endofibrosis. Is that what they call it?
Yep.
Anyways, that leg was actually bigger. The muscles actually grew because it was it was more sore on the massage table, and it grew in size when you measure independent legs. So it was actually growing, even though it was getting starved of the blood flow. It was having to work harder, so it was getting damaged more. So it was interesting. Like my first time, Chad, it was just a slow progression, and then it was like, the emotional abuse that goes with that, like the self-inflicted, and then stuff that comes from the team too, because you're supposed to be performing at a certain level.
Right.
You get I got let go because of it, because I was not able to perform to the same level. So,
well, let's be honest. Did you get let go, or did the phone calls just stop?
Oh,
well, I mean,
when JV stops picking up the phone, you're fired.
it was the way I found out that I was not on the team was we had a full blown out fight over it, because it was not. JV it's hard when you're the director of a team. It's hard not to be friends with your riders because you spend so much time with the people, and I think at that time with him and the team, I think he was learning how to be an effective leader too. I mean, I don't think he handled, and I think he would have probably agreed, he didn't handle those situations exactly right, but we went to blows over the phone about how I found out that I was let go from the team. But again, it was, I think, result oriented. If you have the results, why would they not keep you on? And my results were not going well. It was a year later. I went to Jelly Belly, and then it was on after Jelly Belly. I was riding for Jelly Belly when I saw you on Mount Baldy, and then I had surgery. So it was like a slow progression out of the team based on results, because I was not performing the same as I was earlier on.
Yeah, and that whole time, I mean, for me, the biggest scar from that whole disease is that I learned how to quit. And that is, I still have never gotten over that.
You learned how to quit?
Oh, I learned how to accept quitting. Right?
That's tough.
Like, we had grit. We had, like if it's not right, you just give up. I got really good at quitting when I had it.
Has that been a beneficial thing for you? Have you found it to be beneficial in certain ways?
No, it's terrible. Once it's fixed, like, you just want to go back to being a hard man and smashing people, but do you quit in other areas of your life, Chad? Like, and that's a more personal question. Like, what I'm looking for, like, when I ask that question is like I have a hard time giving up on stuff, quitting stuff, and sometimes that's a detriment. So accepting quitting can be a positive thing if you can, like, okay, this situation is not good for me, I'm going to stop doing this, but otherwise, like when you're trying to hold on with that grit. Oh, no, I mean, I didn't stop cycling. I just would give up on the day, and then I'd feel worse about myself.
Accepting quitting in the events of racing. Yeah.
So it's hard to be a decent bike racer if you quit a lot.
Dude, when we were good, man. When we didn't have that issues, we were flying. We flew. That was fun. We flew.
Fucking quitters. You guys
taken
suck.
a while for me to look back and realize, dude, it sounds so modest, like my intro. But yeah, we were quite good.
Yeah.
I went around back to that. I've got a little bit of a story that I wanted to throw in there, but I did want to take a second. Debbie Dust obviously joined us.
Hello, Debbie.
On the screen.
Hi, Debbie.
We had said that there was one topic that we want to hit, and I want to cover that right after this, but I do want to throw in a little anecdote. When I met Chad had talked to me about being on my wheels for, I want to say, cyclocross. And he had come over, and this was when we were working out of the basement in my house. He'd come over and was hanging out. We were just telling stories and stories and stories. And, it's the typical cycling thing, and I've talked about this a few times, where when you first meet somebody in the cycling sphere, immediately you go to, who do you know? What have you been involved in? Or, oh, no, I was there. Oh, I used to race on, that kind of thing. it's kind of like how because there's no other independent measure for, oh, this is somebody that actually knows what's going on. So we always tend to like one up each other with the information in a way. I mean, it's not like I ever one up, but we were sitting there, and at one point I think I looked at Chad and I was like, oh, well, I know Mike Friedman. Do you know Mike Friedman at all? And he was like,
I've seen him naked.
Yeah, I've met him. So
I do have one good Mike story that's decent for this podcast, and it's
I have no idea where these go. I forget all the stuff you guys always tell me, and I'm like, I don't remember that.
No, Mike, you'll know this one because it also like inevitably impacted your career a little bit. We were at Tour de Gila. I don't know if we were at camp or tour. We were in Silver City, New Mexico, and
is this where you rented the airplane?
Mike was complaining about a saddle sore.
Oh,
and I was like, stop being a baby about it and just get a safety pin and stick it in and pop it. And so he's sitting in the hot bath. It's like quiet in there for a while. And finally he's like, Chad, come here. It's not going. And I go in, and it's the size of a thumb. And he's got the entire safety pin in it. And I was just like, oh my God, go to a doctor. And I think that's the one you had removed, right, Mike?
That's the second time I went to stirrups at a gynecologist. Alan,
just stick it in.
Alan, we had to go get that relief. One excised. I had a real problem with saddle sores, but that's that 20% that you're talking about, Chad. Like I didn't have that kind of saddle sore issue until like it started going up in training volume, and that one's the one that I got a blood clot from when I had that one removed. So it was
that's what I was gonna say. I think that one was the bad one. But yeah, I mean, if you think of the full length of a safety pin was inside of him, and it was not bleeding, and I was like, dude, that's not okay.
Saddle sores are really, really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people that plague, and I have a lot of advice on saddle sores. We should talk about saddle sores sometime.
I've got a tiny bit of advice when it comes to saddle sores.
Yeah.
That's to try Enzo's buttonhole chamois cream.
Oh, man.
You can buy that at any retailer, and if they don't have it in the store, by all means, ask them to stock it for you so you can swing by and pick it up before your next ride. Once again, Enzo's buttonhole chamois cream.
Got a delightful mint chocolate chip smell to it.
I will say,
smell it and not want some ice cream.
I will say that I got home yesterday, and there's some Girl Scout cookies sitting on the counter at home. And long story, but obviously, the Girl Scout cookies in our home are not given to me. They are just there. And I was told very specifically by my mother-in-law, who absolutely adores me, obviously, that these are not for you. These are for your children. And I came home, and at one point she goes, well, you can have these. These are Thin Mints. And I was just like, that's dangerous. So I came home yesterday, and I grabbed a Thin Mint, and I was like, kind of got it to here. And the smell, I was just like, it's chamois cream. I can't eat that.
Chamois cream is good stuff.
By the way, chamois cream, all natural ingredients, very, very beautiful, pure, natural ingredients made in the USA. But don't eat it. Okay, so one of the main topics that we were talking about we have a little thread forum that we converse in beforehand, was a topic that Leah kind of touched on today and kind of felt like she had a bit of an epiphany or wanted to discuss a little bit more and wanted to get some more advice. I'm just going to turn it over to Leah. Okay. How's that for an intro?
Thanks, Rob. Okay, so I'll just delve into it. So this morning, I was working through some stuff in my head, some mental struggles, and trying to figure out how to approach this in a way that makes sense. Something that I was pondering about is dealing with discomfort. I am one of these people that is naturally wired to just kind of avoid any discomfort. Like I hate being cold. I hate uncomfortable emotions. I hate any sort of physical discomfort, which sounds silly because I also consider myself an athlete, and being an athlete by nature, you would think you automatically just embrace discomfort, but I don't. I avoid it. I run away from it. I hide it. I hide from it. I, use whatever methods I can to just constantly try to avoid as much discomfort as possible. And this morning I was sitting there thinking through all of that in some stuff that really wasn't even related specifically to cycling, but it really got me thinking about how this plays out for me in my training. And recently I had been really struggling with just feeling like I was having a difficult time in some of my training intervals. And there's this thing that I do when I go to the gym twice a week. We do the weight sled, and I am timed for a specific distance. I go back and forth across the gym, certain number of lengths, and my trainer times me. Lately, I have just been like, this just hurts. It just hurts. It hurts my lungs. It hurts my legs, and I don't like this. And so I slow down. I've been kind of doing the same thing in some of my training sessions. And I'm like, what is going on? What's going on? What's going on? This is a pattern that I kind of get into. And it just kind of dawned on me that this is all about my inability to figure out how to mentally deal with a discomfort. And I thought about it and I said, what really is discomfort? I mean, in terms of the physical discomfort, it's like, it's just a burning muscle feeling, and it's just a burning, kind of your lungs. I'm not in danger. Nothing, I'm not going to like explode or anything. So it's really silly that I am missing out on all of the potential gains every time I back out of something just because it hurts too much. And so I decided to put myself a little challenge today. So I get to the gym, I roll in there, and I'm like, all right, hello, weight sled. You and I are going to have a different approach today. This is not about, is it going to hurt too much today or not? This is about, can I tell myself to be okay with the discomfort? Can I give it a big hug, embrace it, and say, come to me? Let's get the gains from this. This is okay. And also to tell my animal brain, you're safe. It's okay. You're safe. Because I think there's a primal thing that happens in our head that says, oh, danger, danger. You need to back down. And I also wanted to kind of address that. So I had this mantra the whole time. I'm going back and forth, and I'm feeling the pain start to build up. And I just kind of embraced it. And then I just kept telling myself, you're okay. You're safe. You're safe. You're safe. And I had a complete breakthrough. I mean, I took like a minute, and we're talking about something that normally takes me 5 minutes. I took down to almost 4 minutes just through this mental exercise. Mm-hmm. And I thought, holy shit. I think I just learned something here.
Yeah.
And so I got to the shop today, and I was talking to Tim, and I was like, now I am curious to know how other athletes, especially high performing athletes, deal with that discomfort, because I think that's what sets a lot of people apart athletically. Your amateur athletes. I mean, that's not the only thing, but I mean, that's definitely something is that ability and that willingness to really go into that discomfort and not pull back away from it. So I was asking Tim how he handles that when he's in this situation. So would you like to share?
Sure. And I think what I remember from telling you is I just kind of lean into it. I think that, like you had stated, it's just, pain is just a feeling. You can overcome it. You can embrace it. And that's what I've learned to do over the last couple of years to better myself as an athlete, is just learn to accept the pain for what it is in the moment, but learn how to tell myself that it's okay and I can go harder, I can push harder no matter what I'm doing. You still have the ability to go deeper and deeper and deeper. You just got to be willing to accept the pain. And I think it's hard to do. It's not easy to do. You have to train yourself to do it. And I think for me, a long time ago, I came up with this. I don't know what year it was, and I don't know if it's something that I coined, but it's a phrase that it was like a mantra. Like you asked me if I had a mantra, and I didn't think of it at the time. But I think for me, the one thing that I repeat to myself silently or when I'm suffering is success is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the more you can be comfortable with being uncomfortable in whatever you're doing, the easier it's going to be. You know, if that makes sense. And I've just kind of stuck to that. And I mean, there's been times where I've been burying myself in intervals in the basement where I'm snotting all over myself. I'm screaming at myself. My wife thinks I'm dying. And it's just because I have this ability to just push myself until I'm literally feel like I'm going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had this idea for having this be a topic that we discuss, especially with Chad and Mike, and then Debbie. I know this is something that's kind of passionate for her too, and for herself, and helping others through. And Chad, you're a coach also. So it's not only like, I'm curious to know how you deal with that, and then also how you teach others to deal with that. I don't know, Chad, you want to jump in on that?
Sure. I mean, I think I have the same kind of mantra as Tim there. And I tell people, like, you have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? I use a lot of analogies, because I think people sometimes get caught up on words and they don't quite hear the message. So one of them that I use a lot is like the frog in the boiling water, right? You throw a frog in a boiling pot, it's going to jump out immediately. But if you put the frog in the cold water, you could turn the temperature up and up and up and up until you cook the frog. And I think that's a good analogy of how, because you're going to murder yourself, right? You're going to kill yourself.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Point. Good point.
But delicious, you know, as you just want that temperature, the effort to go higher and higher, right? And you don't have to, you know, how many cliches can I throw in here? Don't let perfection, you know, disrupt progress, kind of thing. The only person you have to be better than is you yesterday, right? You just have to go a little bit farther, a little bit longer, one more second, you know, like, we all get to a stage of bargaining in workouts where we break down the time. We say, you know, 10 more seconds, 5 more seconds, whether you count pedal strokes, whether you count seconds, whether you shut your eyes and talk to a deity, whatever it is, you're just trying to get through this moment. And Tim and Leah, you're both right. Like, you are not going to die from this, but reframing that pain is just information. It is uncomfortable. It's not going to kill you. But I think Mike and I think Tim can vouch, high-level athletes kind of enjoy that place because that's where all the decisions get made. Like, that's what separates the wheat from the shaft, right? Like, that's where bike races are won. And if you're one of those people that's going to come out of that period in a good spot, you're never afraid to go there, right? It just, that's how bike races get split up is we hit that button, we go into that dark place and challenge people to follow us. So. Yeah,
and I think it speaks to also, and real briefly, I think you don't necessarily have to be the best or the strongest or necessarily the smartest bike racer. You just have to be willing to suffer longer than everyone else until they bow out, and you'll eventually win. and doing
one more
that.
second. You just have to outlast everybody by 1 second.
Exactly. And teaching yourself in those small increments, like Chad is mentioning, 1 more second, 1 more second, seconds turn to, tens of seconds, which turn to minutes. And then you're able to go longer and longer and longer. And guess what? By then you've made so many gains. You've outdone the competition. Sorry.
What are you sorry for?
I mean, that's
interrupting. I don't know.
No.
Mike, what's your experience on this topic?
Well,
do you have a mantra? What do you tell yourself? What's the stories going on in your head when you're hurting?
I think it varies on the time of the year, what event you're doing, how in shape you are, what your goals are, where you are in your head, your emotional state, depending on what you're doing, right? Like if I'm just starting out, my interval hurts differently than when I'm getting in shape and can dig into that interval or, effort load, right? And it's a mindset of I'm going to go as far as I can. I'm going to push it as far as I can. That's honestly why I like the online platforms and racing is I'm racing and riding against real people. So I'm pushing myself, that mental fortitude. I like that challenge of like, how much can I hold on to versus this person and what goes into that, your breathing technique, the pedal stroke, the ability to suffer, like all those things, kind of come into play in terms of, holding on to outride someone else, which is ultimately why you're doing the effort or the interval, right? Just to simply get stronger. And so like Chad was saying, I kind of enjoy the feeling of knowing that I'm getting stronger, that process. The only way to get stronger is to suffer. The only way to get faster is to suffer. The only way to get stronger and better at almost anything is to suffer through, whether that's practicing to get better at something or, practicing by doing harder, more intense intervals just to get stronger. And I like the ability of knowing and physically being able to see where I start off slower and like see my body change and the numbers I can put out and also in the mirror of when I'm getting fitter. And the only way I'm doing that is by putting the time in, whether that's just riding easy or doing intervals and going hard. And I think I know what you mean about the fear, Leah, in terms of like getting your heart rate so high you think it's gonna. I don't know what you mean by the fear. It sounded something different than like the fear of the pain. What you were
I think
describing?
it's a little bit of a critter brain thing. I think our critter brain is designed to protect
monkey
us.
brain.
Yeah.
From what
brain.
though? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of when you're describing that
It's
fear?
It's not that I consciously am afraid of it. I just think that we're biologically, there's a process that when there's things happening physiologically that well before we're actually truly in danger of harming ourselves, I think that mentally our brains are designed to kind of like try to shut us down.
You know that part where you're going hard and you go, I think I'm going to start having a heart attack now. Like you guys all have that, right?
You're not going to.
Yeah, that's the part that's scary. That is the part that's scary because I never see like I'm getting back into this riding thing a little bit now, and I never see zone 5 when I'm doing these efforts. But I'm seeing high heart rates. Like I'm like, man, that's pretty high. What does that look like when it's going 185 beats per minute? That's pretty high. And if it were to burst for whatever reason, that'd be a pretty painful experience. That is kind of scary. So that's the fear that when we were talking, maybe, I don't know if that's what you're describing.
Me personally, I'm describing getting up out of a chair.
Well, that's scary, Rob.
Hey, if you're gonna go out, at least you're doing something you love.
Yeah.
So many years ago,
that's my philosophy.
I don't even remember when this was, Rob, and I was fretting over doing an FTP test, and I've always just mentally could not.
You can burn out a whole month,
right?
Dealing with you're like, I have to take an FTP test in like 4
and it was
weeks.
just like my
whole month is
my
ruined.
entire judgment of my entire self-worth relied on the results of a fucking FTP test, and so Rob calls Debbie and he's like, Debbie, I need to ask you a favor. Will you please talk to Leah because she's losing her shit? And I don't even remember Debbie. I don't even remember specifically the conversation.
Firewoman Debbie.
I was just like, she doesn't even know me. How is she gonna help me?
when you chimed in on the message, like, oh, what is she talking about? Oh, no. I remember. But then I was like, where did I live when that happened? Was I still living in Chicago? Was I like, I couldn't remember. Was I still there? Or was I here?
No.
Oh, no.
Here, I think.
You were not here
Yeah, well,
anymore,
Momo's
I don't
not,
think.
Soon
This
I
is
will no longer be
probably
here, but that's okay. That's
it was like 5 years ago, maybe.
Well, and you know, everything that Chad and Mike and Tim, everything that you guys have said up to this point, like solid, you know, super solid. And what I'll add to that too, and mind you, like I'm 11 years removed from racing bikes and 12 years removed from racing bikes and allowing myself to suffer, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into mindset. And, you know, some people I think do really well with things like mantras. And I think that, you know, it's not something that gets solved in one day or 1 hour or one conversation. I think that everybody there, you know, certain people, you know, do better with certain types of mental strategies to you know, deal with suffering, that kind of thing. You know, some people are you know, they do better when they really focus and are really intensely focused. And there are other people who they do better when they let their brain wander. You know, there's this really great book, I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called Working Body, Dancing Mind. And so for me, that was always kind of, for me, it was like, yeah, you know what, my body can work. It'll work all day, but my head cannot be super connected to it because unfortunately, I have a hard time dissociating my emotions from my physicality. And so I knew for me, the best way for me to perform at a high level physically was to let my brain go take a walk, go somewhere else. Or, you know, the other thing I would do if I had to focus, especially on like time trial efforts and things like pursuits, you know, where you go so hard, you just can't feel your arms when you're done. I ran the last lap, like, I can't feel my hands and arms anymore. I must be doing this just right. You know, what I started to do, and I think I might have talked to you about this, Leah, when we had that conversation, was to not think so much about how you feel, but to think instead very much about how you move. You know, and you know that however many, you know, fine points to a perfect, efficient, movement efficient pedal stroke. And it doesn't mean jack how high your FTP is if you're horribly inefficient. So, you know, I would think about how efficiently I could move, how fully I was breathing. Like I came up with this inventory of like 10 things that I kind of would let my mind focus on. You know, are my feet doing the right things? How am I anchoring down in my saddle? Am I relaxing? How is my breathing? You know, where am I holding tension in my body? Like those types of things. So for some people, those types of things work. My husband's a completely different animal. That guy can outsuffer anybody any day. I don't know how he does it. So I think knowing what kind of animal you are and coming up with a strategy individually with a coach who can help you, you know, obviously improve on areas where you're already strong, but then also address areas of challenge for you physically and mentally and come up with a good strategy for how to deal with that. I love what you related about you and the sled this morning at the gym, the fact that you were thinking about it and had a strategy going into it. There's nothing worse. It's like you don't want to show up on the start line or, you know, start an interval workout and not have had a conversation with yourself about the fact that you were going to suffer and, you know, had to be open and willing to putting yourself into that kind of place and that kind of space and having your head kind of ready to deal with that as well. Because for me, at least for me, you know, my body was always able to do the work. It was my head that was like, yeah, no, I want to do this. And I also, you know, had to figure out like, where did that come from? Like, Leah, where does your aversion come from? Like, what is that rooted in? Like, I knew for me, I was, you know, I raced a lot of cross, but I will tell you, I hated it because I hate being cold. I hate being wet. I hate being dirty, like all of the above. And I just knew like, if I was going to do well in cross, I had to let those things go. And so it was this process, like an entire week before I got to a cross race of like wrapping my head around the fact that I was going to do a bunch of stuff that I hated. But once I got there, it was like, okay, game on. It was kind of like getting married. I was like, oh, I'm going to cry. I'm going to cry. No, I put the dress on. I'm like, boom, let's do this. So, you know, having kind of that mental strategy or know yourself, like, I need that. Not everybody needs that. Some people just show up and like, boom, do it. But knowing what's going to help you arrive in the best mental place to be able to put yourself into the hole like that, like, it's a process. And you know, good job on that today. Yeah. But I will put this out there. There may come a time where that mantra or that mindset going into it and during isn't going to work. And so kind of being able to head that off or be like, okay, this is the be all. It doesn't necessarily be all end all, but it's helped me today or it may help me next time. But being creative and, you know, journaling, about this stuff so that, if at some point in time that approach doesn't quite work the same way again, to have that to draw on. I think journaling is a really powerful tool. I don't know about any of you other guys, whether or not that is. I think not just necessarily for your athletic performance or whatever, but journaling generally, I think is a really good tool. And you can get your thoughts out there as well about, how you felt about what happened emotionally, that kind of thing, right, so that you can move into it next time, better prepared, and maybe even, again, take another 30 seconds off that effort. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you actually just reminded me of something that I had discovered a few years ago, and I had completely forgotten until you just mentioned this, where I would be sitting there in a longer interval set, and I would do, like you said, I would take my brain for a walk, kind of, in a sense. I would disassociate almost as if I was cutting myself in half, in a way where I would look down at my legs metaphorically and think, well, that's interesting. You guys are working pretty hard down there. I can see that you're burning and everything, but that's okay. I'm up here and the weather's nice up here. You guys just are, you guys just keep doing that thing down there. You keep doing that thing, but I'm up here. I'm okay up here. It was like, I had to put my brain someplace else. And that separated me at that moment. And then there are times where I get into, and this is something that my coach Pascal taught me to do, is break down these efforts and count by eights, and just count to 8 every pedal stroke, count to 8. And I actually, my PR up Mount Lemmon in Tucson was over 2.5 hours of counting by 8. It was insane.
Now that sounds miserable.
I just like stared at the road in front of me and counted by 8s until I hit the top of the mountain. And I don't know. I had it in my head. That's going to be my strategy. It had been working for me to that point. And I was, so sometimes, like you said, the strategy kind of needs to change. And shift around different tools. Sometimes they get a little stale.
And I agree with that. I mean, Chad and Mike, you guys, and Tim, you guys can probably speak to this. Like, I was never much of a time trialist until like the second half of my career. I did a lot of crits. I grew up in the Midwest. We were up doing crits, and then when I wanted to start doing more stage racing, I started working with a coach who was like, you need to improve your time trialing. And I was like, I would rather lay across the middle of the road than have the time trial. And then I realized that it was because, in crits and stuff, a lot of times you're reacting to others, you're being proactive, and, obviously it's different. And, you can win crits like time trialing too, like done that. But I think it's the best way to win a crit after you left the field. But, your approach is different. That. Like, you guys could probably speak to this, like the mental place you need to put yourself in to do, a pursuit or to do, 40K time trial or something, is a little bit different than it's going to be in a place where you have to react to others. You have to be on top of and working with your teammates and communicating. So my mental prep for different types of races was different for sure. And the one thing that I really harnessed the power of for me, especially when it's like before long time trial efforts or for before pursuits, was music. For sure, to get me in a good headspace to be ready to do those types of things. So. Yeah.
Like during your warm up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that's got a lot of F words.
Oh, so not Adele?
Not Adele.
I was always a Metallica kind of guy,
only
like old
before
Metallica,
the Black Album,
or Rage Against the Machine.
Okay.
Yes, before the Black Album. Yes.
I like yodeling.
Yeah, one of the things you had said earlier was in reference to our animal brain or our monkey brain or our subconscious, and Debbie, you mentioned some things, and Leah, you even said some things. The best way to control that is to give it a task, right? Whether it's counting your breathing, counting to 8, whatever. That giving a simplistic task, count your breathing, like completely inhale, completely exhale. Don't get those short, choppy breaths. Relax into that effort as much as you can. It sounds really counterintuitive, but you're going as hard as you can, but you need to relax into that. So just that's how I actually say, like, focus on the process, to just find some little thing to focus on, whether it's counting to 8 or breathing or, one more pedal stroke, one more RPM or whatever. Task orienting that subconscious is
totally great. I mean, we were watching Paris-Nice. We were watching the time trial or whatever time trial was, something was on the other night. And my husband was a really good time trialist. And, we still talk about these things. And it was funny because we're like, there's nothing worse than the first 5 minutes of a long time trial. I remember every time I would go to the start house and be just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I hate this. Why do I do this? It hurts so bad. I can't stand it. I want to just stop. And then you remember, like, okay, no, like Chad said, you get back to like inventory things to think about, inventory things to focus on, how you move, your breathing, and embracing that place that you're going to, and then just dealing with it. Just kind of like getting comfortable in that place and knowing that you have the ability to do it. You've done the work to get yourself there. And that's the best you can do.
Are we losing her?
Yeah, I'm being cut out.
The internet on her end is cutting in and out. It'll all upload. Everything you said, Debbie, will end up uploading.
Sorry.
It's just that we didn't hear it in the moment.
It was profound, you guys.
I'm sure it was.
I'll
catch it.
Can't wait to hear it later.
Catch it in the editing.
We'll catch it in the editing. It was just like freezing up and out and up and out. But we'll catch it.
Yeah, it's the little nice thing about the thing we're using is that everyone's individual streams are uploading to the internet independently. So it'll catch up right now. Debbie's at 81% uploaded, and the rest of us are at like 99. So you have
slower in the south.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah.
I lived there for a bit. Yeah. That was the worst 4 months of my life, but that's a whole nother thing.
I think in terms of like effort given, depending on what you're doing, I think a way for me personally that it every time you go into a hard session or whatever, if you've done it before, tried it before, and maybe didn't get as far as you want to, you still got pretty far, right? So you're putting in the work, you're putting in the time, you're making a little bit of gains. But when you put it into like a competition setting, and you do better than maybe you anticipated doing, or you won, or whatever the case may be, it makes the next time you have to revisit the same session or a similar session that much easier to get through, because you noticed from prior experience that you are making gains and you can suffer, so to speak, if that makes any sense. But that's kind of how my brain functions and thinks about it.
I think about things I've been able to get through and then realize
like
what the differential is between where I used to be and where I am now, and then I quit.
Like in a couple cross races when I lap Chad, I'm like, got this dude again.
Oh my God, get out of the way. He's like 3 lanes wide. He's so big.
I thought I saw you eat a donut on the start line, bro.
I was.
No, all kidding aside.
It was a cruller.
Great choice.
You guys know Steve Magnus. He has a great article they wrote. I think it was like 2018. It's called "What Holds Us Back from Performing to Our Capabilities Ourselves." It was in the science of running. And the 4 main ways are self-handicapping, which is the logic goes, if you don't do your best, then the result really doesn't matter. It doesn't reflect your true capabilities. So whatever. Feedback avoidance. We all like to live in a bubble and then avoid anything negative or threatening that might, change who you think you are. Self-serving bias.
Numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That number isn't good enough. So it's not, self-serving bias. So like if we win, that's us. I did that. But if I lose, then it was the weather or my tires or my coach or my workout, like something else.
I call that Cat 4 syndrome.
Yep. Yep. Or downward social comparison. So yeah, I did bad, but like Tim would be like, I did bad, but Chad did worse. So
I would never say that, dude. I would say, well, at least I didn't do as bad as Chad.
I thought he usually just says, well, I won. And where was Chad?
No, I'm not like that. For you listening and maybe viewing, I am not that person.
He is not. We're
not.
We have fun. We have fun together.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, those are all like, ego protection mechanisms. And Whether you call it Cat 4 syndrome, whether you call it aspirational FTP.
That's a good one.
People are like, yeah, no, I'm just 20 watts higher.
Oh, yeah.
I think going to that limit, Leah, or anyone really, it's frightening because it's standing naked in front of a mirror. That is who you are. That is what you are. That result is valid. Unless you want to have that self-serving bias where, the trainer fucked up or the internet fucked up or Zwift is stupid. People always say like, oh, inside is like harder than outside. I mean, it is, but it's really just our mental headspace, right? So, I try to, preach or just, the only way you're ever going to know what your limits are is if you go explore them, right? Mm-hmm. And whether it's pain that you don't want to feel or, a sensation or, just the environment or whatever, you just have to take a step further into that cave, into that darkness. And if you go there frequently, you'll get better at going there more frequently.
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, we've talked about a lot of different things. You could take it farther in each realm of some of the stuff we talked about, the mindset, the time of the year, how many intervals you've done, the fear of, the pain. For me, like I would have anxiety going to events if I knew I wasn't ready. So the only reason I was doing those intervals is to get stronger and feel like I was ready enough to be at that event. Otherwise, it's, it's a suffer fest, right? So it's better to suffer when you can control the effort versus suffering at the hand of the event that you're just driven across the state to go to as a kid, So, I mean, and that's the thing too. I think the grit and the mindset that Chad, you were talking about, early on, we had that stuff, early on as juniors, as kids, you start to learn how to like hold the line. But the time frame can really matter. Like if you're doing lots of different efforts and then you have an event coming up and you're garbage at the event, you could have put yourself in a hole. You didn't recover enough, the recovery aspect. So like, there are times I have pictures of me dropping out of a race because I've done like a massive effort where I've given up on it, the emotionality, or like pictures where I'm driving, even though I'm driving because I'm still in the race, right? It's a totally different emotionality towards it. And then the thought process when you're at that elevated effort level, right? It's what you were talking about, decision-making when you're at max heart rate or when it's go time and you're having to make a decision. You can easily make the wrong decision, whether you're in time trial mode or you're in race mode for the lead out. It's so easy to screw it up. And the only way to get that clearer is to do those efforts. So the only reason that I like the suffering is one, I like the suffering. I like the feeling of it, but two, I like that it pushes me simply to know that I'm going to be better for it. And it doesn't even matter like how far off of someone else I am. It's like right now anyways, before it mattered, but now it doesn't matter so much. I dig into the effort for myself. I like knowing that I'm better than I was a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago.
I will add that, not counting events that maybe I was like over qualified or over like Tim at a CCC race, right? Like a local race, it's not a threatening environment, but like
right,
a race that was over my head in my career, I would
sorry.
No. Like I would say that like there was maybe 2 times in my whole life where I ever got to the point of saying to myself, I don't care how much this hurts, I'm going to go until my legs stop. Like only twice in 25 years have I ever gotten to that point in a race. And yeah, peak fitness, biggest race of the year, like it was Tour of Georgia. And I didn't crack. I made the group. And I think about that moment a lot because that was to me the pinnacle of my athleticism, like just a willingness to go until my absolute body just quit on me.
Not a lot of people have that ability.
One of the things I used to do to that end, like going to a huge race. I mean, lining up to I lined up next to Jeannie Longo and all these like incredible prolific women, Clara Hughes, and and I would just look around like, I really have no business being here. That's not a positive, kind of headspace to be in. So I would just look around and be like, they're all just people. And then, you know, and I'll work just as hard as
simplify
they do. Like Chad said, like just go until I got nothing left. And it served me well. So I think that, you know, definitely just like, well, they're just people and I'm going to go just as hard as they are. So it definitely served well. So, you know, Headspace is a big piece of that.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, that mindset that's still a mindset. It's like a decision to look at it differently than being stressed out, or, you know, I used to get stressed out over that too. Like, and it's looking back on that, you know, with the review of retirement, you can identify races where you did not sleep for because you were nervous as hell for, or races where you knew you were going to go in there and crush people, you know, or like you get on the line, you're like, I don't belong here. You have this imposter syndrome, even though you do belong there, you know, and you do the work and they're just people, you know, like, and that's it, you know, and that's a hard thing to recognize when you're in the moment and you maybe not feel so good in training, or you may not feel so good leading up to it, or maybe you overtrain, or maybe you're undertrained or whatever, but you have to be able to turn that off, which is the anxiety that I was talking about, you know, the pre-race. You could feel that anxiety building, and the only way to overcome that is to get ready for it by doing those efforts, you know, and like we keep coming back to, it's different now that we're retired and we're doing it for fitness. I don't know, Leah, if you said you're feeling that more and more now, but it is interesting. There's all kinds of lessons that you when you think about it and you look back. That's why, Chad, I was asking you if it would apply to other things in your life, because there's so many lessons that you learn through this sport of cycling, and just the demeanor of holding on, or the demeanor of training hard, or the demeanor of not giving up, or the demeanor of like thinking positively, or what can you learn out of it? How do you get better? How do you go longer? That can be carried over to so many other aspects that you live in your daily life that are actually beneficial for your daily life. You know, so I you know, it is.
But not only like give examples, make it relatable and understandable in a way that
I guess what I'm saying is how it all
can,
connects to the bigger picture.
Latch onto it and
looking back on retirement, what it's taught me. But, and I'm grateful for that stuff. Really, I mean, if you didn't have that, I mean, how many people do you know that don't have that? Chad, you say that people misread what you're saying. You can teach this because you've lived it. You know, you can coach it because you've lived it. You can literally give examples of how it worked. You know,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think
exactly.
Yeah. I think the biggest handicap to almost every athlete is this idea of failure. Like somehow not finishing a workout, or not finishing an effort, or
the perfectionism,
you know, the perfectionism. And I'm like, if you get through 90% of the workout, 90% an A, like that's a good, like whatever you went as hard as you could go that day. Like you're not going to be 100% every day, right? Some days you're going to be 90%, some days you're going to be 80%. The goal on whatever day it is to get out 100% of that 80%. Like if you can access everything you've got, success, ultimate success. That's all you can ask for.
And maybe that's eating better, or sleeping more, or making your bed, or maybe it's cleaning your room and taking the day off. Yeah. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean going out there and training every single day. It's like training is a lifestyle. Riding a bike is a lifestyle. Racing a bike is a lifestyle. There's all these things that make it a better lifestyle, make the training better, the racing better, the lifestyle better, you know? So it's not simply smashing yourself every single day. It's being disciplined.
I think too, to that end of failure and the whole idea of failing or not being good enough. Like I think, you know, tying your own self-worth to that is really destructive, speaking from my own experience. So, you know, learning.
For sure. It's like Chad said, getting easier to quit. It's the same thing. It's like I accepted quitting. Go on. I want to hear what you have to say, Debbie. I interrupted you. I keep doing that to people, and I apologize.
No, and I think ultimately one of the hardest things for me, and I, you know, you struggle with it. It's not just athletically, but I think generally work, that kind of thing, the imposter syndrome thing. Like the most critical thing is not to connect your performance as an athlete, as an employee, as a husband, as a wife, as a whatever, as a mom, as a whatever. You know, it's not who you are. The valuation of you as a human being has nothing to do with your MFing FTP. Okay. And that kind of underlies all of this, to me. And that was kind of the biggest lesson that I took away, when I stepped away from racing, because I basically blew myself up, just because I did, you know, my value as a human being was directly tied to my ability as an athlete. And that has taken me until into my 50s to let go of, and I wish I had learned it sooner. But, you know, insight and hindsight, you know, in retirement too, like that's one thing, you know, one piece of advice that I would give to anybody in the sport is you as a human being are not your value as a human being is not tied to your results, how much you weigh, what your FTP is, how cute you are, and whether or not you're photogenic for the promotional material your team is sending to sponsors. Like, none of that matters. So, and in a very shallow sport, like ours is, especially for women, like those things, like you can't tie your self-worth to that. I think it's a little different for women. At least it was back in the day, but I think that, we deal with challenges that I think, are unique. And I wish there were more kind of leadership voices, female leadership voices, to encourage women to participate. And that's what we do. We tie our self-worth as human beings to the things that we do, and it's unfortunate. So, yeah.
I think one of the ways I like to maybe help people separate those two, Leah, again, the things you've brought up today, right? FTP, 20-minute test, whatever, and self-worth. I like to explain to people as best I can, and I'll ask this question to Mike. Mike, of all the races that you've ever done outside of a 40K time trial, how many of those races were decided on 60-minute power or FTP?
None. Well,
right.
It depended on if you had a breakaway, if you were breaking away or solo or in a group of, like our race, the one race that got me a pro contract, and I told these guys before, is when we sprinted at Univest. And dude, I was flying. I was on form that day. Like, you have a really good day, but like, dude, my FTP was probably pretty high. And we were in a 3-man breakaway. And if it wasn't, I don't know. That's not a very good example.
We were in that we were a breakaway for 8 laps.
Was it only 8 laps? Was it only 8 laps?
Yeah. Because I won the race the year before, and that's how I got my job.
It seemed way longer, yeah. It seemed like the whole race, but you're right. It was only like 8 laps. That's a fair point, dude. It's not. It's just an indicator of fitness and what you can sustain for an hour. That's all it is, right? So,
but it's so it's an easy thing to measure, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's the most forefront, simplest thing, the buzzword, whatever. And I'm like, I've never won a race on 60-minute power.
Yeah. No.
60 seconds, absolutely. 20 seconds, 5-minute, 15-minute, sure. But like outside of a 40K time trial, a 1-hour race, I've never attacked on lap 1 and just gone steady for 60 minutes. Ever.
I don't know if you're going through, the cross race is another one, but it's like if you're in a rotation,
it's too punchy.
Yeah, but if you're in a rotation, your FTP is 220 or 210 or 199 or 190, like you're going to struggle a lot more than someone whose FTP is at 250 to 280, right? I mean, it's just an overall measure of fitness.
Yeah, for sure. Like if there's the average pace of the race and your FTP is above it, you have this capacity to play with. If your FTP is below it, you're stuck. It doesn't matter.
Which is the whole effort of why you struggle and embrace the suffering so you get stronger. And then,
But I've just never gone out to aim at FTP for a race, ever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think
I would just take that information there and just say, that's how you're going to race. Like you'll follow and you'll jump gaps, and then you'll follow and then you'll jump gaps. You're never going to attack and ride 30 laps by yourself.
Well, and all data can be massaged. So, you interpret and apply for whatever the particular application is. I mean, if you're not going to do time trials, like, I don't know. There are a lot of different schools of thought, but I think data are data, and how you use and apply that information, how you interpret it, that's kind of the key. It's not just numbers. There's more to it than numbers.
Maybe you didn't go hard enough in your FTP.
Well, what I always do is if you read Andy Coggin's, write-up of how to do a 20-minute test, it requires doing a 5-minute blowout before you do the 20. And I actually make my athletes do the 5 minutes for power. So they have 5 minutes on, 5 minutes rest, and then they do 20. And then I take the relationship between the 5 and 20. And usually that's somewhere on a spectrum of 112 to 145%. And the higher that percentage is, just the more anaerobic capacity the athlete has. Yeah. So if we go towards VO2 efforts, we're going to tune those up more towards the 5-minute end than using FTP.
That's a lot like the 4DP that they have on that Neil Henderson made for the Wahoo system program. Yeah, the 4DP.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it takes into account.
Mine's a 5, a 20, and a 1 minute.
Yeah, so it's a variation of different skill sets that your body has. Because let's face it, you do have fast twitch, slow twitch, medium twitch muscles, or a range of the fiber that you can dive into, which is why I think having the FTP test. Oh, we lost Debbie. Which I think is why having the FTP test as a range test, like that's why you repeat it over and over. Not, you don't have to do it over and over and over, but it is nice to have a range, because then you can say, okay, you can track your fitness over 2 months or 3 months and say you were here, now you're here. All these different numbers go up, You have to have some sort of baseline to know where to go from. But
I will also add, this is kind of a complicated one, that I separate the athlete and the rider, right? The bike racer, right? And the example that I give is that in Dairyland, there's a stage, East Troy, which now it's a little more complicated, but it used to just be a long, narrow rectangle. Corner 1 and corner 3 are kind of pinch points. And my teammate, Mike, not Friedman, like Lucas, he's a few inches taller than me. We're the same weight, we ride the same bike, we have the same aero wheels, we obviously have the same kit. So all intents and purposes, we're pretty similar. This one year I got third, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And I rode that race about as perfectly as I could. So if there were 90 laps and there were 2 pinch points per lap, 180 pinch points, I probably hit 160 or 170 of them in the top 5. Mike finished in the top 20, but he was in that washing machine effect all day. We obviously had the same average speed for the race because he finished, 5 seconds behind me or something. his average power for that race was 320 watts. My average power for getting third was 245. So if you have the skills to know where to be and when to be and how to actually race the race, again, I just think FTP is
it's garbage.
One of the things you need to worry about, right? Like your development as an athlete is on a completely different scale. Like your athleticism will always kind of be improving at a slow linear rate if you're doing everything right. But when you get to a race on the day, you have to race with what you have. And so we have to race with efficiency. You have to race with smarts. You have to, brakes don't do anything but slow you down. Like Tim, I'm sure you brake way less than me on a cross course. Yeah. So, right. And I'm like, my big ass on a wet race has to go through it in one race. Yeah. And that's most of the time that I've given athletes more power, whether it's a sprint or 5 or 20 or whatever, but they don't address their race skills. Like if I give a guy another 100 watts in training for his sprint, I've seen the athlete sprint at 300 meters. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, my sprint's better. I'm like, you're just pissing in the wind sooner. Like, if you don't address how you're racing, it's all kind of a moot point.
That comes with time.
We've all seen it. We've all seen it over a lot of years. There's a lot of racers where on the books and by the numbers, their numbers are fabulous. They're fantastic. They should be, if we just race with Kink slips, they'd be on the top step every day. And yet they get kicked out of races. They end up getting dropped. They're constantly have the Cat 4 syndrome afterwards. Every 5 minutes, going, this happened, or no one knows how to handle their bike. That one's my favorite. Anytime after a race, when something comes off, no one can handle their bike. No, you know what? Maybe you don't know what's going on, and you're in the wrong place, and you're putting yourself in the wrong place. But I never had any physical ability, but I could actually do swing and grip because of my ability to read where to be and I always love it. I was always called the best damn 2-lap crit racer ever because I was in the right position for the first 2 laps. Sorry, blew up. But, it's that thing that we've all seen it. We've seen tons of athletes do it. We've seen tons of racers do it over the years. Your ability to read a race or know where to be or know where to go can far outweigh your physical fitness in a lot of different, races and situations. Not all of them, but in a lot of different ones. I mean, I could race the smartest race known to man, and you're still going to lap me twice or 3 times.
I will add kind of as a side note, like you said, people don't know how to drive their bikes. If you crash, no matter what happens in front of you, it's your fault. You control your handlebars, you control your pedals, you control where you sit in the group. I've rarely ever seen rider in first place crash, right? Now, a lot of people don't like to take responsibility for sitting where they sit, being where they are, but facts remain, if you don't like the people that you're around, move up. Yeah.
Well, Brad Huff never got good numbers when he did the testing. He always had shit numbers. I used to call him Herbie. He was like that, the Volkswagen movie with that little race car with a half eyelid. He was like a 4-cylinder screamer. I know. Oh yeah, his number was he 69? Herbie wasn't 69, was he? I think he was 3. I don't know. Yeah.
I'll find that out. You guys talk about it.
But Brad would get.
Mike,
go ahead, Chad.
Do you remember when we did aero testing at LA with Alan?
Yeah.
Like I think I tested a little bit more aero than Zabriskie, and all you guys were like, "Why do you suck? Oh my God, you're terrible."
But dude,
So,
that's
yeah.
53. Okay, man.
I was more aero than all of you guys in my drop bars than you guys were in your aero bars.
But dude, you could have had that could have been another great indicator of your iliac artery issue already developing. You know, when you're tucked into the bar position and then you're riding hard as you would be in a time trial position, yet you're not performing very well, yet you're more aero than one of the best time trials in the world. You know, like that's definitely an interesting indicator. It's not the only indicator, but it is an indicator. Yeah. Why would you not be able to perform? If you can ride at a higher level sitting farther upright, then why can't you perform at the same level in a more aerodynamic position? Right. And simply when you're trying to become a better time trialist or a better, longer road rider to raise your FTP, you've got to be able to ride higher wattages at higher heart rates for a longer period of time. That's it. Right. So that's why the FTP thing matters. But again, coming back to the artery thing, it is interesting when you think about it, because that really wasn't that much farther before you started to have issues. It really wasn't. It was only a couple years.
Yeah. The first time I know I had it was Charlotte. The first time I think I may have had it was in June in France. I got dropped pretty early. And when we look back, we're like, yeah, that may have been something.
The power pedals, the individual, like when you can see the different power profiles for each leg, that it can also be a pretty good indicator of that, because then, you're not putting out the same power. Whereas if you have one power meter and it averages it out, you can't always tell unless you have the ability to separate them out.
Yeah, and I've had a 3% difference for a couple of years now, which is pretty huge.
Yeah. We've talked about a lot of different things in this episode, Rob. There's been a lot of things and we didn't cover any of those completely in the farther detail you could have gone into. It's just interesting to see where it goes sometimes in conversation.
I'm just happy we talked about actual athletic things, so you guys were all busy and we didn't talk about tech or history things. So I was just
Rob, I'm good with tech stuff, so if you want me back.
Yeah, come on back. Hey, no, you're more than welcome.
Anytime, Chad. Yeah. I'd love to see you again.
I was going to throw the Adriatico yesterday, rider on
5. Yeah, his Pirelli tires.
And everybody on Twitter is all, it obviously was. It was set up as one. One of those hookless dip fields, and the sealant flying all over the place. But believe it or not, for the FCS on that, it's kind of fun to go out and look at it. The wheels crash. 10, 11 flat position on it. So the wheel do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have the weight of a body sitting over top of it, going fast and hitting stuff. So, I mean, it is carbon fiber, so yeah, there's lots of room for error, and then they race those wheels race to race. And sometimes things get overlooked too. Not saying that's the case, but.
Yeah, you never know. There could be a billion athletes, and I don't waste that kilogram on anybody, but one of those things, you push equipment to the edge.
Did he get hurt? Did the guy get hurt? I didn't see this video. I didn't see any of this.
He was standing up next to the bike. He had a little bit of road rash right underneath his butt cheek. That was pretty much it.
Dude.
Call me old school, but I'm still stuck on tubulars.
Because they work. They're a pain to put on, but they work.
They flat and you don't die.
We still glue quite a few tubulars. Probably more than most of the places in the area, or in this part of the country for the most part every year. It's good when you're on a first name basis with a guy that imports the glue. That means it's for you. drawing this one to close. Once again, everybody, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions or any topics you would like to have us cover, please send them over to Road is Dead, all one word, Road is Dead at gmail.com. Go on over to YouTube, check out the channel under Road is Dead. Go ahead and like or subscribe to our channel. We do need those subscriptions over time. Like and review us if you just listen to the audio version using whatever podcasting app that you use. So thanks all for joining us and enjoy the run.
Ciao.